Story 1. I'm a mother of 3, so our grocery bills are quite high. My husband works at a tech company, and I'm currently staying at home to raise our kids, who are 10, 7, and 3 years old. I go grocery shopping at least twice a week, usually at the King Cullen near our house, although I sometimes visit the nearby Target as well. These are 2 of the few grocery stores in our quiet town. For context, we're an Italian family, and I'm currently 40 years old. This incident happened less than a year ago when I was 39. One day, I was running late with my shopping and ended up going much later than usual. The King Cullen near us closes at 10 p.m. and it was already past 9 o'clock, so I hurried over to the store with my flyers and coupons. The kids were complaining about the lack of food in the house, so I needed to make a quick grocery run. Most days, I have to shop with my 3-year-old daughter, Haley. Since it was late and my husband was home from work, I finally got the chance to go shopping alone, which I consider a luxury. I arrived at King Cullen, which was nearly empty at this hour since it would soon be closing. I grabbed a cart and quickly started going down the aisles, picking up everything on my list and anything that was on sale. I was in the cereal aisle when I felt a tap on my shoulder, which startled me. I turned around to see a very tanned man about my height, wearing a baseball cap, a black t-shirt, a red zip-up hoodie, and jeans. He laughed and apologized for startling me, saying he had been looking everywhere for a specific bag of chips that was in my cart and asked where I found them. I politely told him the aisle, but he said he had already checked there and couldn't find it. So I led him to the exact spot where I found the chips. He thanked me with his awful breath, and I smiled, about to walk back to my cart. But then he started making pointless conversation about why he liked those chips so much. Something trivial like the ingredients or the lack of a certain ingredient. I kept trying to inch my way back to my cart, making it obvious I was done with the conversation, but he didn't get the hint. Then he made an awkward pause and said, "Gosh, you're pretty." I said thank you and told him I had to get back to my shopping before the store closed. I went back to my cart, but he followed me and kept talking. I politely told him I'd really like to shop in peace. He finally seemed to understand and walked away, but for the rest of my time in the store, I kept seeing him circling the aisles. Each time he passed the aisle I was in, he'd slow down or even stop to look at me. I was getting increasingly uncomfortable and hurried to finish my shopping. When I finally got to the checkout, as I was unloading my cart, I noticed that the man with the red hoodie was behind me with only 2 or 3 items. He didn't say anything, but I felt his gaze on the back of my head. After checking out, I pushed my cart away and he called out, "Have a good night, ma'am." I ignored it. While loading my car, I noticed the red hoodie guy in the parking lot, watching me as he walked to his car. A run-down-looking Honda, probably 30 years old. He didn't start the car but just sat in it. I finished loading my groceries, got in my car, started it, and began driving out of the parking lot. I checked my rearview mirror a few times and didn't see any headlights behind me, so I felt safe to drive home. It wasn't until I pulled into my driveway and looked to my left down the street that I noticed a car with its headlights off, slowly driving down the street toward our house. It stopped a few houses down and it looked like the same Honda from the parking lot. I went inside and called for my husband. He came downstairs looking concerned, and I told him I'd been followed home by a creep. He hurried outside to check, but by that time the car was already gone. The following weekend, late at night when we were all in bed, we heard shuffling sounds outside in the side yard. I shook my husband awake to check it out. He opened the window and saw someone below trying to open the side gate to the backyard. After hearing the window slide open, the man looked up and started running. My husband grabbed a baseball bat from under the bed and ran outside. When he came back a minute later, he said he saw the car speeding down the street. He described it as the same old Honda that the red hoodie guy was driving. It was definitely him. We called the police, and an officer arrived within 5 minutes, given the late hour. I described the man and his car as best I could, and that was that. He never came back after seeing my angry husband chasing his car on foot with a bat. It's still unsettling knowing that a creep like that knows where I live, though. Story 2. When I was in college, I worked at Wallbounds, a 24-hour store. Since it was open all day and night, a few unlucky employees were always stuck working those dreadful overnight shifts. I thought, being 20 and a college student, that my boss would never schedule me for one. Unfortunately, she saw my availability on Mondays and Wednesdays and decided I would be a perfect candidate for the occasional night shift. One day, I noticed I was scheduled to work on a Tuesday night from 12 a.m. to 8 a.m. I had to triple-check the schedule to believe it. I felt sick when I saw it, and when I asked my supervisor why I was put on the overnight shift, he told me that since I was over 18, I didn't have much of a choice. I considered quitting, but needed the job and the money, so I decided to just go through with it this one time and then tell my boss I couldn't do it again because I needed to study. I arrived at the store at midnight to relieve my co-worker, Amanda. Half of the lights in the store were turned off to save on electricity. Surprisingly, there were more customers than I expected doing some quick midnight shopping. However, after 1 a.m., the store was almost completely empty, with only a few customers each hour. By 2 a.m., there were hardly any customers left. I was incredibly bored, and there hadn't been a single person in the store for over an hour. I started to wonder if there were any other employees in the building. It didn't seem right for a 20-year-old to be running the whole place alone. I noticed a bald man who looked like he could be a manager walking past the front registers every few minutes. He had a key ring attached to his car keys and was holding a small backpack. I asked him if he was the manager, and he came over and asked if it was my first day. I told him it was my first night shift. He shook my hand without giving his name and asked if I could go to the back warehouse and organize the pallets while he watched the front. I wasn't sure what that meant, but I figured I'd figure it out. As I walked to the back of the store, I saw him doing something to the entrance door, like reaching for a switch on the side, as if he were locking it. In the warehouse, I met a tall man wearing a manager's vest that said, "Wallbounds." He introduced himself as Rob, the night manager. I mentioned that I thought the man at the front was the night manager, and he looked puzzled. When I described the man, Rob asked me to show him who I was talking about because he was supposed to be the only manager on duty. We didn't even make it out of the warehouse before all the lights in the store turned off. Rob told me to wait in the warehouse while he checked what was going on. I watched as he walked through the warehouse doors into the darkness, lit only by the glow from the dairy coolers. I sat on a pallet box, texting any friends who might be awake to tell them what was happening when I heard a door open on the other side of the warehouse. It was separated by the freezer and dairy fridge. There were only 2 ways in and out of the warehouse, both leading back into the store. I stayed seated but alert, listening for any sounds. Then I heard quiet, slow footsteps getting closer, followed by a voice saying, "Hey kid, are you in here?" But it wasn't Rob's voice. It was that bald guy's voice. I quickly and quietly slipped out of the warehouse doors into the store. I jogged to the front, looking for Rob but couldn't find him. I called his name. Nothing. I grabbed my jacket and tried to open the exit door, but it wouldn't open automatically. I tried to force it open, but it was locked. I heard footsteps behind me and almost screamed when I turned around, but it was Rob. He flicked some lever on the top right of the door, unlocking it. In a panicked whisper, he told me to hurry and get outside. He followed me out and immediately called the police. I overheard him telling them that he believed an armed man had locked himself inside Wallbounds and was possibly attempting to rob the place. I told him to mention to the police that I thought the guy was coming to harm me in the warehouse, which he relayed to the operator. Rob suggested I wait in my car or leave, probably because he didn't want the store to be held liable if something happened to me. I went to my car and watched for a while. Within 10 minutes, there were at least 4 police cars outside the store. They went in and I couldn't see what was happening, so I eventually left. I didn't quit after that incident, though. The next time I went to work, my supervisor explained what happened. The security footage showed the bald man moving around the store suspiciously, checking if the coast was clear. He cut the lights and headed straight for the warehouse where I was. The scariest part was that if he was armed and robbing the place, he might have been planning to harm me. The cameras caught him leaving through the emergency exit in the warehouse long before the police arrived. I never worked another overnight shift again after speaking with my boss, and I stayed at that job for a few more months. I'm not sure if that man was ever identified. Story 3. I used to work as a night restock worker at a supermarket in a somewhat rural town. The store was called Great American, and it was the biggest and best supermarket in the area. My shift would start as soon as the store closed at 10 p.m. I worked from 10 p.m. to 3 a.m. at the latest, restocking the shelves and organizing everything before the next operating day. Of course, I had the keys to the store for after hours. It was usually a team of 2, myself and one other person, either Terry Carter or Alfonso. Tonight, I was supposed to be working with Terry. I arrived at the store and let myself in through the back, where all the inventory yet to be stocked was kept. I started my work using the pallet jack to bring a whole pallet of boxes out to the shopping floor. I began with the bread and nuts aisle, rotating the older loaves to the front and placing the newer ones in the back. Halfway through, I realized I hadn't seen Terry yet. I walked to the back area of the store where the inventory was stored and where we usually left our belongings, but he wasn't there. I left the back door slightly open with a doorstopper for him when he arrived, and I went back to work for another half hour. With still no sign of Terry, I returned to the back of the store. He wasn't there, but I noticed the back door was shut. I assumed this meant Terry had arrived. I went to open the back door and saw that the doorstopper was outside, which I thought was odd. I called out Terry's name, but it echoed through the room with no response. So I decided to call him. He answered, sounding like he was still in bed, and I asked if he was at work. He said he wasn't coming in tonight because he was sick. Suddenly a chill ran down my spine. I told him someone had moved the doorstopper, but he suggested it might have just slipped out on its own. I wasn't convinced, though, as I had wedged it tightly under the door. I did a quick check around to ensure no one else was in the back of the store. Not seeing anyone, I went back to work, although I felt a slight sense of unease. I was stocking the rest of the bread when I heard a loud noise echo from across the shopping floor. Someone had to be inside. I got up and walked to the middle aisle that intersected all the other aisles. I stood there for a moment, and then I saw a man dressed in black on the opposite side of the store in the dairy aisle. He walked past, looking down in my direction. My heart dropped. It felt like that scene from the movie Signs, where the alien walks past the birthday party. I tried to think logically. Maybe this was someone filling in for Terry's shift and my boss just hadn't told me. I started walking quickly down the center aisle and called out, "Excuse me," loudly. As I looked to the left down each aisle, I spotted him at the end of one, fully facing my direction. When he saw me, he moved out of sight. I called out again, "Excuse me," and started running down that aisle to catch up. I hadn't gotten a good look at his face yet. When I reached the front of the aisle near the cash registers, I saw him again, all the way down by the bread aisle. Half his body was hidden behind the shelf, his mouth hanging open, and he started waving me over without saying anything. His expression was disturbing. I attempted to talk to him again, asking, "Who are you?" But he disappeared behind the shelf. I wasn't being paid enough for this. I went outside, sat in my car, and called my boss. I told him there was some random guy roaming around the store. He told me to get him out if I could, or call the police. I wasn't about to physically confront a crazy person, so I called 911. I waited in my car until a police officer arrived. I greeted the officer and asked him to follow me inside. We walked around the store looking for the man. We found him standing in one of the aisles again, creepily staring at us, almost as if he were playing a game. When the officer commanded him to come over, he surprisingly complied. He was put in handcuffs and he was the strangest man I'd ever seen. He kept smiling and looking at me, licking his lips repeatedly. He had huge bags under his eyes. The only words he spoke were in response to the officer, saying he was just looking for a snack. I didn't like the way he kept staring at me as the officer walked him back outside to the car. It was a menacing, threatening smile that I haven't forgotten to this day. I continued my work after that, but needless to say, I never left any of the doors open again. Thanks for joining me on this journey into the night. If you enjoyed the hunt and want to see more adventures, don't forget to hit that like button And if you want to stay updated on all our midnight mysteries, make sure to subscribe and ring that bell. Your support helps us uncover more secrets and bring you thrilling new content every week. Until next time, stay curious and keep hunting. This is The Midnight Hunt, signing off.